I want to apologize because apart from this slide, I don't have other visual slides, and the previous presentation was so good in that. And I will have a lot of words on the screen. But anyway, what you see on your screen now is one of the slogans of the protest of last year in Russian, in Moscow, and it says, "We are very sorry for the disturbance, but we are here to try and change the world." And the protests that we had in Moscow last year and starting from November of 2011 were incredibly creative. There were many more images that I could show you, and there have been a lot of other events, including a small Occupy happening in Moscow. Well, small, it was quite long because it lasted a few days, and in other cities around Russia that created a lot of visual narrative that I could use for a presentation. But what I would like to tell you a bit is like what kind of change people who are protesting in the streets of Russian city, what kind of change they were concentrating on, and in which way this change was like selected in a positive and constructive, proactive way. So there were a lot of protests in 2011 and 2012 in Moscow and in other cities for the other side. And they were unprecedented because since 1991 there have been literally no major protests in Russia, and the Russian society and the Russian youth was seen as apolitical and not willing to move outside their kitchen or outside their meeting places. The trigger for this protest were the parliamentary and presidential election that has been engineered in a way in which the president and the prime minister just swapped places, and so President Putin came back in power. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets repeatedly, like in several demonstrations in bitter cold, and they wanted a remake of the election. This was their main request. So people were surprised as they were out because they could not believe that so many people would join together. And this had this had a result in terms of creation of a new mechanism of trust between online and offline. People recognized itself, understood that they were a force, and this had a very important result as dissipation of fear that had been just putting everything down. But the protest, of course, because it was formulated in terms of we want new elections, we want to cancel these elections, did not achieve the result because the government was just really not looking into having a conversation with society or like engaging in society and seeing what were the requests. And having not reached their intended goal, the protest movement seemed to lose momentum, and there were like obviously a lot of moments of soul searching, a lot of moments of discussion between the protesters. And the moment that I think was the crisis one was the protest on the 6th of May 2012, because part of this protest turned violent and was classified as a riot by the authorities. And so, of course, people started saying, oh, here we go, protests don't achieve anything. In our country, people can just fight, and the police will just fight with us. Now, what happened and why this push of change that we've seen in the first 4 months of the protest lose their momentum? At the beginning, starting from November until the presidential election in March, the authorities were confused because there wasn't a real response from President Putin, who was almost silent, or at that time still Prime Minister Putin, who was almost silent. Television, that is the major medium of propaganda in Russia, was kind of confused, was giving sometimes space for protesters to come and talk. Even this guy who is seen in Russia as one of the leaders of the opposition, Alexei Navalny, was allowed to go partially on television. So there was like confusion. But after May 6th, after the presidential election and the inauguration of the President Putin, there was a very strong response, and so there started a big discreditation campaign on television that was aimed as putting the opposition in conflict with each other, but also, and in particular, at putting society against the protesters. So society was seen as, we are maintaining traditions, and these people want to disrupt our good Orthodox tradition. So there was the question of Pussy Riot, as you probably remember, in February, and they were attacked not as feminists or as people willing change, but as blasphemous people. And the process that was in Moscow in the months after that treated them, they were accused of blasphemy in 2012 and not in 1612. So the protesters were confused by this crackdown, and it took several months again of work to come up and with this moment that we have now, that is we see it as a hybrid momentum where people are reacting to what happens in a proactive way. And we have seen, like, starting from October 2012, for instance, elections of the Council of the Oppositions that took place totally online, and where for the first time in many, many years, people not only participated online in the vote, but that the vote was created in a way where people had to give online their passport number, their address, their name. So people really came out saying, here I am, and I'm doing this, and I am in favor of this and against that. We have seen ongoing attempts of the opposition that is based mainly in Moscow to create platforms and meeting places for conversations in other cities and in other regions, and putting together also something that is really complicated in Russia, because there is a big difference between the capital and the provinces. So this is another attempt to create a proactive conversation. There are numerous attempts of education and coordination of these activities. And what is more interesting, there is a response that is coming out very interestingly against the legislation. In the summer, a raft of legislations came out against internet activities mapped as pornography, anti-pornography and in favor of children, and against homosexual propaganda, what is composed. And last week, for instance, a major entertainment magazine in Russia came out with an issue with 27 people who are gays or lesbian telling their stories, and with their names and with their professional affiliation. And in fact, one of them even works for the mayor of Moscow, which is very new. So the hybrid change, as we see it, is a moment that would lead in what you were describing as slow but sure to something else, and is still modifying. Thank you.